Greetings. You have your ticket? You don't have one, my friend? No, it's a problem. Hit the subscription button below. Come on in. Oh yeah, this DFG, just so you know. Gideon's Flight. Hey guys, just wanted to bring you up to speed on two particular, out of respect, I'm going to call these characters, okay? Mitch McConnell and Joe Biden, okay? And let's start with Mitch McConnell. Lo and behold, Mr. Mitch McConnell, who gave us our first African-American president, who fought or who said that America's original sin was somehow reparations for black people because they fought the Civil War. Oh, and yeah, and of course, all the civil rights legislation that has been passed, by those dear, friendly, loving, big-hearted white people. Wow. We, as the Aboriginal Hebrew Israelites of America, how could we find it in our hearts to thank you so much, Mr. Senator Mitch McConnell? But we have a problem. Oh yes, we have a problem. See, Mitch McConnell, you failed to tell everybody that your how you say your stake in the ground, your stand that you made for all of your white citizenry who feels that you don't owe the former children of those enslaved anything, because after all, all those people are dead now, right? But we're not going to talk about all of the benefits that was passed down. So, but Mr. Mitch McConnell, you forgot something to mention. And yes, research has been done, and some have gone into all of your memoirs and gone back beyond your memoirs, who was so kind and talked so well about your family and the big hearts in your family, how you stood up or how they stood up against the Dixiecrats, etc. But you forgot something. You forgot to tell all of us that your great-great-grandfather, both sides of your family, were slave owners. I wonder how you didn't know that. From Kentucky, the South, the rich, farmlands of Kentucky, the thoroughbred country of Kentucky, Kentucky Derby land. How could you have forgotten? Oh, I forgot. I know how you forgot. Because you only went to school in Kentucky. But your family is from Alabama. You see, you thought you got me there. But, so you're descendants of those people who owned people who look like the very people that you say are owed nothing. Although those women, mostly, that your great-great-grandfathers owned were having babies. Some are mulattoes. We know what that meant. Right, Mr. McConnell? So it's no surprise to us now why you feel you owe us nothing. Because after all, you gained everything on the backs of those that you called chattel. More like cattle than human beings. Right? So just so we all know a little bit why your stance is so firm and all of your followers are so sincere and feel like you've paid back your debt. Okay. Now we know you're nothing but a horse trading, soul trading, human trafficking, lying devil. Now let's go on to Mr. Joe Biden. Yeah. So Joe Biden apologized the other day. I'm sorry that, I took the side of segregationists. Well, here's some questions that I want to share. Not questions, some facts I want to bring to everyone's attention here. For all of you out there who see Joe Biden as this great liberal guy, because after all, Barack Obama picked him to be his vice president. So he couldn't be a racist. Although we know about the crime bill that he submitted, we know about the drug laws that he put in place to increase, the sentencing for crack cocaine almost 300% greater than plain cocaine, and then made sure that, well, didn't make sure, I'm not going to give him credit for pushing the crack cocaine in the communities, the inner cities in the 80s and 90s. But he was surely one to make sure that if you caught one of them with crack cocaine, that you gave them the maximum prison time, and you made sure they served as much of that prison time as they possibly can. And like he said in his crime bill speech, I don't care if it was our fault. Did you know that Delaware? Now, I know you scholars, you guys who know your history, your civics, you're going to say, of course I know Delaware is the South. But I bet some of you guys didn't know that Delaware is the South. So when you hear Joe Biden talking about he was friends with what's his name? Thurgood? I think he said his name, Thurgood. And James Eastland and some of these white supremacists who were still in the Senate when Joe Biden came into the Senate, that they were calling son. They were calling him son because he was a son of the Confederacy. See, he's a child of the Confederacy. Delaware is the upper South. So, of course, he would have been a segregationist. Of course, he would have been against busing. Of course, he wouldn't want to send, as he said, his little blonde, haired children, blue-eyed children, into those, inferior schools where those blacks were. Because after all, he wouldn't have wanted his children to get that inferior education. Because, see, he knew that the way those kids in the inner cities were being educated was not preparing them for the American dream. That education they were getting was preparing them for the American nightmare. And surely we couldn't have any good Southern white children going into those, black schools. No, that couldn't have happened. So, Mr. Joe Biden, and for you who are following Mr. Joe Biden, just remember that he was a segregationist because he was from the South. He was considered the son of those racist senators because, after all, he was raised in the same culture that those racist senators were raised in. Then one other thing about Delaware. Did you know that Delaware, when Abraham Lincoln, 16th president of the United States, when he wrote the Emancipation Proclamation to free the so-called, I'm going to say the so-called slaves, because he passed legislation that could not be applied in the South because they were not recognizing him as the president of the United States in 1863. So, it was kind of a lame duck proclamation if you want to know the truth about it. But even more importantly, in 1863, when the Emancipation Proclamation was passed, did you know that Delaware, Maryland, Missouri, and Kentucky, but since we're talking about Delaware, where Mr. Biden is from, do you know that in those states, they kept their slaves, even though they did not succeed, they did not go with the South, but they were allowed to keep their slaves, and a lot of men in Delaware, Maryland, Missouri, and Kentucky, they went to fight for the South, even though those states stayed loyal to the Union overall. When I say loyal, they just didn't succeed from the Union. So Delaware kept its slaves. So when Lincoln passed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, Delaware still had slaves in 1864 and 1865, and they were considered a part of the Union. How about that? So Delaware has always been an anti-black state. Always has been. And every legislator that came out of that area from, I think it was one of the first states, that was colonized. I think Delaware was. So let's just go back from 1776 until, at least 1995, when Joe Biden put his Joe Biden bill out there. Delaware was a definitely anti-black state. So all of you guys who are thinking that this apology from Joe Biden was sincere and he meant it, no, he isn't. And you're wondering why it seemed so difficult for him to apologize. And when he was confronted, in the debates, he seemed to be irritated because he's a white segregationist. He's a pro-segregationist. You follow me? You know, he's a wolf in sheep's clothing. He can't tell you he's a wolf, because if he told you he was a wolf, most of people being sheep, they would run. So he's got to look like a sheep, but he's a wolf. He hasn't changed his heart. Go back and look at the crime bill speech. Go back and look at the laws that he supported around, you know, crack cocaine and mass incarceration of people, you know, black people, so-called African American, so-called Negroes. Go back and look. It's right there for anyone who wants to research. So this is what we're going to tell you, Mitch McConnell. This is what we're going to tell you, Joe Biden. No reparations, no vote. Simple as that. And you can put all your stooges, the Roland Martins and all your other stooges out there to talk about how stupid everybody are. I think the congresswoman from Minnesota, I think she's Arab, if I'm not mistaken, you know, who's talking about women of color and that the, you know, black women need to come out and vote and get rid of Donald Trump. Bullshit, hogwash. We don't want to hear your God. Reparations. If you want our vote, you're going to say you want reparations for the descendants of those who were enslaved here in the United States of America. Other than that, we're not a part of your team. We're not. So don't, you can include us in your language, but those days are past where you're going to hoodwink us, bamboozle us into journeying up with you for your own self-gain and for your own agenda. If you can't say the word reparations for the descendants of slaves, then you can just, you know, you can just go it on and keep it moving. You can pass us on by. Because guess what? Come next November 2020, or November after next, that's what we're going to tell you. Bye-bye. Come talk to us when you have something for us. So, in closing, Mitch McConnell, I guess you wouldn't feel like anything is owed to the descendants of slaves, especially since you got the DNA of slave owners running all through your veins. And Mr. Joe Biden, you're a Southerner. Why wouldn't you be against busing? Why wouldn't you be against integration, right? I mean, why wouldn't you be called a son by bigots and racists? Because you were their son. They didn't have to call you boy. That would have been saved from maybe somebody from up from, I don't know, maybe Massachusetts or New York. They may have gotten called boy. But not one of those Southerners, not one of their own kind. And that's what you are, Joe Biden. And so for all of you, you know, so-called blacks, African Americans, Negroes, I'm just telling you, if you get behind Biden, you get behind a racial segregationist. Modern day one. That's all he is. He's just a modern day. He's a 21st century version of what the 18th century and the 19th century was so proud to pronounce. Segregation yesterday, segregation today, and segregation forever. Remember George Wallace? Okay. Now you know. Again, no reparations, no vote. You can get our vote, but you're going to pay me first. Thank you guys for listening. Hope you'll share this video. DFG. Talk to you soon, guys. Bye now.